Okay, looks like we're ready to start. Oh, one more thing I have to do is get this on. Shouldn't take a moment. Get in the right folder, plug in, switch on, and we're on. Good, 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 good. Okay, let's get started then. Let's get that back in the right place. Why has that gone down there? We're not on object PHP, it's gone well down. There. That's where we're at to. Okay. That's where we're at to. Okay, well, so thank you first of all. Do you mind if I mention you, because we're live on the internet?
Yeah.
So may I mention you by name?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so welcome, Josh. Thank you for coming. That means that I don't have to pack up and go home. But a little note for, not for Josh, who's not well, but for anyone else who was relying on someone being here. If nobody is here, we don't have a session, I go home, all right? Especially on my birthday. So well done for coming, and you can now have a special one-on-one session, okay? This gets a bit funny. I was going to say this to the whole group, but I'll share it anyway because we're live and other folk will be watching. So it's just that I have to confess that it's not just my birthday, but being retired, I'm also 67. And you might think now is the time to say, hey, I could go away after this lecture series and put my feet up on the deck chair in the garden and enjoy my a little rest. And I've just been sort of seeing a few things that have made me think, no, that's not what it's about. There's a guy called John Kirkby who started a group, CAP, who are Christians Against Poverty, and they've actually helped thousands of people out of debt. And he's sort of said, you might think I'm a great guy. I'm not. He said, I'm just an ordinary guy like you and me. And to do what I do requires me crossing the boundaries and stepping out my comfort zone. And last Friday, I was listening to someone in the House of Lords, and you sort of think, House of Lords, that's okay. But actually, what she does is amazing. She's appointed to the House of Lords, so she's been awarded her baronetship, whatever you call it. And she determined that she would use oh, brilliant, well done. Hi, Sam. Two, brilliant. I was just saying to Josh that if there's nobody here at 9 o'clock, I go home. So, yeah. We have Josh, apparently, who I think might be listening home. He's not so good at the moment. So that's three of us anyway, 50%. So I was just saying a little bit about folk who challenged me in the last week or two, and I was listening to someone called Baronet Cox, Caroline Cox, last Friday, and so she goes into wars. Well, she aims to be a voice for the voiceless, is her what she talks about. So she goes into war zones where you're not allowed to go, and where it's definitely not Home Office policy that anyone should go there, and you don't hear about them either. She then sits with them and listens to them, and then brings their story back to the House of Lords and seeks to do what she can in the House of Lords to help. So, for example, over in Myanmar, we know about the Rohingya as an oppressed people, but there are other oppressed peoples, and we don't hear about them. She goes and visits them. She's in her 80s. If in her 80s she's willing to cross the boundaries and go beyond her comfort zone to sit with folk with bombs dropping around, then I think I should be looking to sort of cross the boundaries and do new exciting things. And the interesting thing is that the guys I've been listening to have basically said, when you do cross the boundaries, it might be challenging, you might be uncomfortable with it, but the rewards are very great. I was just thinking about you guys on ITO, including if you're at home at the moment, just thinking about you guys and thinking, you could think this is the last run of ITO. There will never be another ITO course. Welcome, Matt. Yes, so you could sort of think, just go with it and, make the best of it and have done. No, you could go out with a bang and be the best ITO group we've ever had. So I was just sort of thinking, if this is, I was talking about various folk I've been listening to in the last week or two, and one was Baronet Cox, who I was listening to, and how she, in her 80s, she goes into war zones to listen to those who don't have a voice and to bring their story back. So you guys could, see what you can do to change the world. It is possible. Just the little bits, but the key is being willing to step over the boundary and go out of your comfort zone. That's by the by. Let's get to work today. Where are we? So we're on week 3. What we're going to do is we're going to go into the basics of PHP and as a scripting language, server-side scripting language for our web build. And JSON, the JavaScript object notation. The reason we're going for JSON, which Russell will introduce this afternoon and we'll be focusing on in the labs, is because we want to look at not just scripting, so you can have an interactive web page, but so that you can have a database behind it, feeding the display, and we'll be incorporating that into labs. We're sort of trying to lockstep it with as far as we can. It's always difficult when you've got different lecturers doing stuff with the database module. So that's why at this stage we're just using JSON, because it will give us a data feed, but we won't have to worry too much about MySQL yet. We'll try and bring that back a little bit. Is that still working? It's probably giving me birthday messages. It looks like it's still streaming. Right. Okay. Sorry, where were we? I've just distracted myself and I've lost my train of thought. Oh yes, JSON, thank you. PHP Basics and JSON. So I was going to ask you, have any of you programmed in PHP before this module? JavaScript object notation?
Not yet. We looked at it really briefly. I've seen code of it, but I've never actually.
Okay, so hopefully we'll take you through it reasonably gently this week, and you'll see how it goes. It's not a big deal, the JSON feed, but as I say, we've taken that to be a gentler way into. So we'll be able to focus on the bringing in of the data and displaying it, which is half the problem. Then later we can look at the MySQL database side and how we manage the remote database, as it were. Okay, so first of all, for this session we're going to do the feedback on Lab 2, discuss Video 4 briefly, an introduction to PHP, then we'll take a break, and then we'll look at writing good code standards and PHP doc and so on. Okay, that's the plan. So first of all, the Lab feedback, which is here, which I'll have to do manually, I think. There we go. So fairly brief and straightforward this week. So comment of the week, as I said there, is listen to Russell's words of wisdom at the start of the lab. One thing he did say at the start, but needed to sort of really get into, was the idea that you shouldn't try and apply Bootstrap on top of previous CSS. You must start, well, I suppose you could try and do it, but you're going to end up with all sorts of tangling up stuff going on. So the best thing is to strip out all the old CSS, so there's nothing there, and then start afresh with Bootstrap. That's what I think actually both of your groups might have done. I can't remember where it was, but there was a real danger if you didn't do that, you'd get into an awful muddle. Always good to start clean if you can. So when I say this week, I mean last Thursday, of course, wasn't a particularly good week for team working because all the work focused on one file. So if you're both editing that same file, there was at least one more group who got the chance to handle merge conflicts. Was that your group, or was it another?
We did it.
You did. And you, okay, right. So so that's no bad thing. learning how to handle the merge conflicts. Then if it comes up at a later stage when you're not expecting it, it's, oh yeah, seen that, done that, know how to handle it. Another group, which I think might have been yours, was it discovered how to use ticket numbers? Was it your group or a different group? Someone was putting, as they were putting in their commits, was putting numbers in and discovering it was ticket numbers. There is a ticketing facility within GitHub. I'm looking at blank faces. Okay, so maybe it was...
Sam was putting in the part that he was doing.
Yeah.
But we never really discussed that, it was just him doing it.
Okay.
So it might be that.
Okay, so you can put numbers in and it will set up a ticket number, and then you can do a commit that will satisfy a particular ticket number. It's a brilliant facility and worth having a little look at and exploring. Apparently one group, I didn't see it, but Russell spotted it and saw the ticket numbers in operation. Yeah, okay, that's good. Something to look at in future weeks. And again, it might not apply to you three guys, but it is important. Don't forget to research the answers for part 3. We're not expecting you to just know. Part 3 is specifically designed to ask you questions about stuff that we haven't covered in the lectures or in the lab, one way or another. So we're expecting you to go online, have a look around, and get your head around the answers and make sense of it on the fly. That's what we're looking for, to see how well you can research and get your head around the answers and give us clear and lucid answers to the tricky questions we tend to ask in the last part of part C. I think that's it. Basically, any questions on that? Okay. Oh, I thought that was a hand going up from me. Okay, right, that's good. So let's, before I switch over.
One question.
Yes.
Is there a way we can see our lab marks?
Yes, I was thinking about that. We ought to do that. Let me chat with Russell as to exactly what we do. The lab marks as a whole are coming out averaging at 67%, but we're doing it on A, B, C, D as on the thing. Because we've changed the way the letters match to the numbers, they look like lower grades this year, so you're basically ranging from B to C minus, I think, or we might be B plus to C minus, I can't remember, across that range. But they're actually good marks because we've changed the way they scale onto the percentages. It was getting silly. We got to a point where last year we were giving A star star star. Well, this is ridiculous. This is like A levels. So we reorganised it so that A is 100%. You can't get an A star anything. A is 100%. So B is 80%. So there's some good marks in there. But so you want to know your individual group marks, and I'll just chat with Russell about that. I don't think there's a problem with doing that, but I don't know why we've never done that in the past, but I don't see why we shouldn't. So, and I think it would be an encouragement to you to know where you're coming in and why. Why is it that there are the difference in the groups, for example? It's not massive, but there is a difference. Okay. I was now going to move on to the video 4. Can I ask how many of you watched video 4? 1. Okay. So Sam, down to you. Tell us. Oh, by the way, we're live on YouTube. So if you don't want me to mention your name, say now, having already mentioned it. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, fine with that.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So tell me, what was in YouTube?
Well, I will give a warning for starters that I watched it at 2 AM last night.
Right. Yeah.
But, I remember that, well, obviously there was PHP.
Yeah.
There was PHP in there.
Yes. What else did we have in there? It was things about PHP functions and
there was one about automatically changing the header or something for each page.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what might be good? I'll show you the outline that I've got. Well, it's not really an outline; it's just sort of key notes. It might be good for those who've not watched it to watch it sometime between now and the lab, only in the sense that it will actually flesh out, give some sort of substance to the theoretical stuff we'll talk about, and seeing that before the lab might be helpful. So it went into the idea of, first of all, avoiding repeated code, and the previous video, video 3, we had the different pages with the clear separation between the content and the styling in the CSS. So we'd separated that out completely, but what we had was a lot of repeat code on each page, and one of the things that comes through in the video is the fact that the menu is repeated on each page. And if you then make a change to the menu, you've then got to find the menu on every single page and update it correctly. And if you make a mistake, then which is quite likely when you're doing the same thing repeated times, and if you had a big site with dozens of pages, you're pretty likely to make a mistake, then you're going to have a problem. So the idea is to take the repeated stuff out as a template and bring that in, and we use on the video a PHP include.
Was that the page top and page bottom?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
So we took the template, and because there's sort of stuff at the top with the menu and stuff that's repeated, and stuff at the bottom with the footer that's repeated, we take all of that out into two different templates in the video, a page template top and a page template bottom. We include them using PHP include, which is a function, so you include file name, and it just brings it in and streams it like HTML, and you then put the individual page content in, and then you include the bottom bit, job done. Except in the video, yes, before we do that, we then note in the video that we've got all these pages called index.html, contact.html, etc. We've got all this PHP stuff in, we run it, and the PHP is completely ignored because we call the page .html. We have to call the page .php before it says, oh, there's some PHP in here. Right, I'll need to bring in the PHP interpreter and run that to make it all work. So we change all the pages from index.html to index.php, contact.html to contact.php, and so on. And that's great, but now our menu is wrong on every single page. But we don't have a problem because we've already brought the menu out as a single template in page top. We change it once in the page template, and all the pages update correctly. Perfect. We're now dry, we're not repeating ourselves, and we've reduced the possibility of errors through doing the same thing repeated times. So that was the first part of the video. We then have, well, I'm going to take this one next, the calling a PHP function, because although we've got a page top template, in that template, when you have a page, it gives you something up the top there that tells you where you are in the website, or what the file is, or whatever. And the problem with the template is because it's the same template applied across to different pages, how are you going to make that change? So in the video, I'm not going to look at that this morning, you'll have to look at the video, and we will need functions in the lab, that's why it's in the video, so do look at it before the lab. So there's a PHP function that we design in the video, and that enables us to put a parameter across the PHP so that as we call up the page top, we can alter how it appears from page to page using this parameter. So that's really quite important, not just for the sake of making our website work nicely, but from the point of view that it's there specifically to inform us and help us for the lab. Okay, so do watch it. The last part of the video, which is several minutes of it actually as I recollect, is all about documentation, and we'll come to that in the second part of this morning. But it's quite important. In the first three videos, we haven't commented anything. We are going to go into commenting, and we're going to use something called PHP Doc, or PHP Documenter. It's a specific standard for PHP, and every year someone seems to have a problem with the idea that when we talk about commenting with PHP Documenter or PHP Doc, we think that they think we mean just put some comments in. No, we don't. We mean follow a particular standard. There are other standards, other ways you can do it, but this is a particular standard that's really important. We'll come to that after the break this morning. So I'm not going to push that too much, but all of that is in the video, okay? It's a sort of lead in. Some of it's still important that you watch it before the load, okay? Right, so let's remind myself. I think now we are going to... Oops. There. Yep, so we'll do the introduction to PHP, and then we'll leave the writing good code and PHP documentation and stuff till after the break, I think. So, let's have a look at our introduction to PHP. It should be this one. It's there. Okay, let's see if this works it. Yes, it does. Okay, so we're going to do our introduction to PHP. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the PHP language, of course. We're going to look at PHP variables as a such as signaling fire alarm test, I presume. One day it'll be a real fire alarm. I think 5 minutes, yeah, perhaps we ought to saunter out how to make people take notice of fire alarms. Okay, so echo is a particular command we'll look at. Some useful PHP control structures. When you're going into a programming language, it's always useful to look at the bits and pieces that enable you to do the loops and decisions and so on, so you can do useful code. We'll look at PHP data types, see what that's all about. We'll look at arrays, that would be quite helpful, and we'll finish with where do I go to get help. So why are we looking at PHP? So this is referring back to the video. We only want to do things once, but we had lots of code repeated on every HTML page. So if we added a page to our site, we had to change the menu on every single page. That is not good news. So we created a couple of HTML templates and included them in our HTML stream by using the PHP include statement. And PHP will allow us to do so much more. You'll see I've said about including partials. There's a little bit running here that's sort of gone on over the few years we've been doing this module about the distinction between templates and partials. Strictly speaking, I guess one would say that a template is, as we've used in the video, where you take the top half of a standard page, HTML page, and extract it as one whole lump, and the bottom half is one whole lump. They're more like templates. Partials are more like if you need to do intricate little bits of PHP that's repeated several times, you might want to say, oh, just plug in that little bit and that little bit. They're more like partials. Typically, if you're building up a menu with lots of ahrefs and maybe some nav/nav if you've got submenus and stuff, that may need lots of little one-liners of PHP that you just include here, or this one if it's a live option, or this one if it's not, if it's highlighted or if it's not highlighted. So those are things that would be more likely to be partials. So that's why I've used the word partials there. So we're looking at the idea of what else will PHP allow us to do. So we can use the PHP command echo to put some text into the output stream. So the syntax is, we just say echo brackets, quote, some text, and that will go into the HTML stream that's being streamed out to the browser. So again in the video you'll see that we actually alter the text of the tab by taking the parameter, and inside the function that streams the top template at the correct point, it then does an echo the text that we want to go in the tab, and that goes into the stream that comes out to the browser. Here it says you can omit the brackets if you're feeling lazy. I get a little bit twitchy about using alternative shorthand notation because it often leads to problems if you're not careful. If that's the expected syntax, I prefer to stick with it. A bit like, you don't have to put all the spaces in, yeah, but that muddles me. I much prefer to see nicely indented code, and then I can see how everything fits together. We can also concatenate. This is fun. Came up in a crossword recently. My wife said, I've never heard of concatenate. What's that all about? Ah, you should be a programmer. So that's when you string stuff together. So we can say echo a bit of text between quotes, a dot to join it up. If it was numbers, you'd use a plus, but the dot is the string equivalent of plus, if you like. So follow it with whatever is in $title, and then a dot, which means then add on the end the string, that bit between the quotes. You can use single or double quotes in PHP, but they are not the same thing. So single quotes are literal. So if you put single quotes around that, you would get literally open diamond brackets, head, close diamond brackets. You've got the quotes there, so that would mess it up. But say you didn't have those quotes there, you would literally get dot, $title, dot. It wouldn't interpret $title, in other words. Okay. So double quotes interpret, so in fact you could put this. That will work. It can be quite nice sometimes, because having too many quotes in something gets very confusing and difficult, but you have to be a bit careful. So that will work. It will do the head/head tags, and it will interpret $title and put whatever text is $title represents in between them. The key there is to use a context-sensitive text editor. We probably haven't talked too much about that really, but it's really, really important to use a text editor that understands PHP, particularly now we're coming to do PHP, that will understand JavaScript, that will understand HTML. So if you're in Linux, any text editor should, worth its salt, even the standard built-in text editor should be context sensitive and should do that for you. If you're in Windows, if you're in Apple, macOS or whatever, I can't remember what you have there, but it is sort of basically Linux based, so I think virtually all the text editors will be sensible in that way. Windows, you've got to watch a bit, but there are plenty of good text editors that will give you context-sensitive editing. And Russell, I'm sure, would tell you about that in the labs if you need a hand sorting out your text editors. But do watch that, because if you've got a nice text editor, when you do this sort of thing, it will show you that it's not expecting that, whether or not it's expecting that to be interpreted in other words. So you could be even lazier, as it says here. So instead of, have we said that? I'm not sure we said that on a previous slide, have we? To show something, so you've got a file that is basically streaming HTML, and you want it to actually start to drop it, you want it to drop into PHP and to do some PHP stuff. To do it, you do an open diamond brackets query PHP space, then your PHP, and then space query close diamond brackets, finishes off the PHP section. You can do the whole file, if that's the very first thing on the file and that's the very last thing on the file, you can do the whole file in PHP if you like, but it's quite happy to have mixed HTML and then drop the PHP in where you want it. That's one of the nice, powerful things about PHP as a server-side scripting language. But instead of saying that, so we haven't even got the quotes or the brackets around there, you could just put diamond brackets query, no PHP, equals $var query close diamond brackets. Do not do that. Quite apart from the fact that breaks several rules where I've said I prefer to go for the long version so I don't confuse myself. This is also formally deprecated. You know the term deprecated? It means that it might work, but it's no longer supported. So there is no guarantee it will work. It might work today, but there's no guarantee it will work tomorrow. It could just disappear, and that would be fine according to the rules, and your code would then break. That's another reason why I tend not to go for the shorthand notations, because you sort of think, yeah, what happens if someone produces one strictly to the rules and it doesn't understand the shorthand. Okay, let's look at some conditionals now. So if statements, the basic syntax is, a lot of this will feel, I hope, like JavaScript. Have you done other C-based languages like C or C++? If you do any Arduino stuff,
A little bit of C,
a little bit of
programming, but only for like 1 week.
Okay, well there's families of languages, so things like C, C++, PHP, JavaScript. There's a whole family of languages that all have a very similar syntax, and if you're into maker electronics, the Arduino, which is sort of £1.80 something electronics board that you can program up and do fun stuff with, that has a very similar sort of again, it's slightly different syntax, and you have to watch as you move from one to the other about, did that want a semicolon there or didn't it, and did it, you know, it's that sort of minor stuff, but the basic layout is very much the same, very much feels much the same. So the syntax here is if bracket some condition, then some statement do something, and then with a semicolon. And if you want to, if that condition isn't true, you can say else do something else, semicolon. Okay, so that's the basic syntax. You could have the long version, if brackets condition, and then curly braces, curly brackets, and then a series of one-line statements that it will do until it reaches the brackets. And if that condition isn't true, you've got an else with more curly brackets and more statements that it will do if it isn't true. So you've got a branching possibility. So if this is true, do this, but if it's not true, do that. Personally, so that's a pretty standard layout. Personally, I was brought up in programming terms to do it this way, and I quite like this. So if condition, then you put your curly brackets there, and then indent with all your statements. And the reason for that is you can then look down and check that your brackets are in line with each other, and you know where you are in the nesting. It's all right for one statement, but when you get an if inside an if, or some condition inside some condition inside some condition, you can get several layers down and get totally lost as to how deep you are if you use that syntax, whereas this syntax I find much more helpful. It uses more lines, so sometimes on the slides you'll see I'll revert to that just to squash it up so I can get it on the slide. But in programming terms I prefer that. That's my personal preference, and other people, and we'll say later, it doesn't matter what you do, but whatever you do, stick to it. So if you decide you want to go for that, stick to it. If you decide you want to go for that, stick to it. Okay. So they follow, again, C-like syntax for the conditions. So for example, if $value is less than 3, so whatever $value is, if it's 2, 1, 0, negative, whatever, then it will do this. If $value is less than or equal to 7, so now if it's 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, minus whatever, it will do it. If $value double equals, this is very C, okay? If $value equals 93, then do it. Do be careful in PHP, as in I think JavaScript and C. If $value equals 23 is not doing what you think it is. What that is doing is it's saying, take $value and make it equal to 23. Oh, so $value is equal to 23. All right, so it does it every single time. That's why if you see this anywhere, you know it's wrong. It has to be wrong because there's no need for an if there. You just say $value equals 23 and keep going. So that's one of the things that, you know, when you're looking around labs, you look at that and think, I think you've got a problem in your code there. How did you know that? Well, because you would never ever say that if that's what you wanted to do. Okay, so it's always double equals if you're checking if $value is 23. For loops, what are they like? You can say for, and then your round brackets. So what's your starting value for your count variable? $count equals 0. While $count is less than 10, keep going round. And at the end of the loop, increment, this is C syntax for C++, that just increases the next version on. That's why it's called C++. It's the next version on from C. $count ++, so increment it by 1. Okay, so it's going to do it as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. At the end of 9, it increments, checks. Oh no, on 10 it won't do it the 10th time. So it's, although you might think it will do it from 1 to 10, no, it does it from 0 to 9 with those numbers in. The long version, as before, so same again here, but now instead of having a statement following here, do something, we have the curly braces and the statements there, and the other layouts as before. You can put your curly brace there, statements and curly brace wherever at the end or there or wherever. Is that right? Okay, so what about PHP types? Do you into the idea of typing? What's types all about? We have a variable like $title, and you're probably expecting a certain sort of...
Is it when it's so in PHP it can almost change that you don't explicitly declare a variable type, it depending on what you make it.
Okay, let's take you into this. So you're sort of getting there. So when you're talking about typing, you're saying that you have a variable like $title, and it might be a string variable, and a lot of this goes back to really to sort of original computer science, the way the numbers are held within the machine. So you've got memory locations, and if it's a string, it's recorded as a series of letters. So each letter, A, C, Z, whatever, is another memory location, sort of, very roughly. There's more to it than that, but that's the basic idea. If it's an integer, it's a, if I go back to my primary school days, counting number. So 1, 2, 3, whole number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that means that a single 8-bit memory location can hold the numbers from 0 up to 255 if you count up in binary. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 255. You can have, now that's restricting, so a typical integer on a computer will be 4 or more bytes. Sometimes you can get large integers, but of course that is only positive, so actually most integers allow you to go negative. So you have a different way of allowing for negative and positive. You have floating point, where you'll have, can I remember it? Mantissa comes to mind and something else. But in other words, you split it up so there's a certain number of actual digits and then a number of powers of 10, so that you can go to small decimals or huge, great intergalactic numbers or whatever. So the reason why you have types is because the way in which they're held on the computer is completely different. Yeah. And actually the computer needs to know what the type is. Okay, it needs to know whether this is to be treated as a string of letters in the alphabet, or whether it's to be treated as an integer or a floating point number or whatever it might be. In computer science terms, a good language is strongly typed. So, for example, if I go to a language that computer scientists love, except it's very old now and it's been replaced by more modern equivalents, many years ago we had a language called Algol. Nowadays, well, not even nowadays, we then had Ball and Delphi. We've got various languages like Smalltalk, that's long since gone. Ada is a more modern scientific language. They're all the same sort of syntax, and they're very strongly typed. So you can't even use a variable like $text until you've declared it at the outset, saying this is an integer, or this is a string, or this is a character, or whatever it might be. So then it reserves the space in memory, computer memory, for that variable, or that set of variables, whatever it might be. And then you can go on and use it. PHP, along with a few other languages like BASIC and Visual Basic and so on, is weakly typed. You can just say $title, and it has no idea what you mean by it. And the first time you use it, it will say, "Oh, so you mean it's a string then? Okay, that's fine." Or you mean, "Oh, it's a character. Okay, that's fine." Whatever it might be. That is not, it's sort of nice in one sense, it makes it nice and flexible, but it's sort of a nightmare in another sense, because you can start saying if dollar text is less than 3, what? So if apples are less than oranges, what? That doesn't make sense. But it will try and do something with it, and we'll see later on some of the areas where that comes up with some interesting scenarios, particularly Booleans, true or false, because it's represented typically by 0 or 1. You can do all sorts of non-intuitive things, shall we say, with Booleans and noughts and ones and things, which, okay, fine. So that's what PHP typing is, or what typing in general is about. So PHP types, we've introduced a PHP function, we took a parameter $title, we didn't say what was expected on that, but we gave it a string, some text, and it was happy with that. If we'd given it something else, it would probably have, well, worked in the sense of it would have done something, but it might not have given us the result we were expecting. So we might have said 3. I don't know what would happen with that, whether it would have treated it as a text 3 or a number 3 or what it would do. Anyway, PHP is loosely typed and many languages are strongly typed. Strongly typed is good in a computer scientist's mind, loosely typed is bad, but that's what we've got. Some basic types, so string, we had that in our functions, so $title might be whatever we had at the top, home page or contact page or whatever. Integer we've mentioned, so that's for counting whole numbers. Float I've mentioned, so a number like -3.59. Boolean can be true or false, but it is represented by 0 and 1. What joy. Okay, so we can say if count is less than 3, so this will be evaluated and the result will always be given as true or false. Okay, whatever we do. So when we had $count equals 23 in the previous slide, the result is true or false. And in that case, $count equals 23 or whatever would always be true. What else have we got? Well, we can also have an array. So for an array, this is where it gets interesting, and it would be good for our websites when we look at databases and so on. So we can have sets of values. So it could be a set of numbers like 3, 5 and 9, or a set of text variables like, or text values I should say, like red and blue. And it can be created like this. Now you have to be careful here. So I've got $colors equals array, round brackets, red, comma, blue, comma, green, and that will give an array of 3 items, red, blue and green. They will go into 3 locations, 0, 1 and 2. It always starts at 0, as all good computer scientists do. We never start at 1, we always start at 0. When I say echo I like $colors 1 cars, what's that going to give me? It's going to print out I like, sorry?
Blue.
Blue, yeah, not red, but blue. That's 0, that's 1, that's 2. So I like blue cars is what that will give me. Okay. So this is an indexed array where I can access the various items through the index 0, 1, 2. Okay. We can also list an array. So suppose I have an array, $products with, well, I don't know, chicken, beef burgers, ham sandwiches, I don't know, something in there. You can tell I'm thinking it must be nearly lunchtime. No, it isn't. So first of all, let's find out how many items there are in there. So $length will tell, if I say it equals count $products, count it will tell me how many items there are in $products. And so I can now say, do a for loop with $I, my count variable, being 0, and it's going to count up until it's 1 less than the length. So if that tells me there's 3 items, I want to go from 0 to 2 and increment through, and echo $products, $I. That will count through, giving me the different products that there are in that array. Okay. But we can also do our arrays differently. So we talked about an indexed array, but we can have this sort of array where we have key value pairs. So we have the key is pre-name, and it's pointing to David. Notice equals greater than to make a sort of arrow thing. So pre-name pointing to David, surname points to Argos, and interest points to cars. So I can say echo $person pre-name likes $person interest. That's going to give me
David likes car.
it's going to give me pre-name David likes interest cars. David likes cars. Okay, so that's how that one works. That one is going to be most useful if we create an array of arrays. Okay, so this is when things really start to get useful and interesting for our website. For example, Boyd cars. We might have an array of cars with different attributes for each car. In this case, we've got a $people array, and the first person in the array is an array of both pre-name David and surname Argos, and the second person in the array is pre-name Russell and surname Newman. Okay, so we've got David Argos as the first entry in the array, and Russell Newman, not spelled right, sorry Russell, in the second person in the array. And then we can go through it saying for each $people, that's a big array, as $person is the bit that we pull out of it. So we're going to step through the array $people and pull out of it individual bits for each entry in the array. So echo $person pre-name, echo $person surname. So that little bit of code would go through the whole array, telling us everything that's in the array. David Argos, Russell Newman, any other entries, whatever. So the for each is actually brilliant, and you will use it a lot in the labs. So you might want to come back to these slides and remind yourself of how it works. Now we're up to the bit where it talks about getting help. So we've said before about W3 Schools. W3 Schools is your friend, particularly on things like PHP. In the early stages, you might find that you want to go to W3 Schools quite a bit and just say, what's the syntax for that? How does this work? How does for each work? And you'll find not only a bit of teaching that how to do it, it'll give you examples and so on. I still use W3 Schools quite a bit, because particularly when you move from language to language to language to language, some of it helps because you can sort of think, oh yeah, that's a C-type language. Oh, that's I don't know, like a basic or a Fortran type language, or whatever. Or that's an Algol type language, and you can move across and sort of get that, but you still need the details of the syntax for that particular language. So coming back to have a lookup reference that helps you as you move from one to the other is really helpful. That's it for now. We are at 10 to 10. How about we take a break? Is 5 minutes enough? So if we take a break for 5 minutes, we'll restart at 5 to 10. We've just got one more slot to do. We might finish a bit early this one. Good. Okay. How do I stop this?
After sleeping at 2 a.m. you try to get it. You just said you saw the video at 2 a.m.
Did I just say that? Oh my god, I don't really help it.
Not just now, but when David asked you about
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh my god, I'm sorry. But no, I tried to get